Bending stress in beam. Let us see some brief introduction about this topic. The load, whenever it acts or when it is applied on a beam, it results in bending moment and shear force. We have studied this in detail in unit number 2, and we have also represented the variation or change of bending moment and shear force along the length of the beam or along the span of the beam in the graphical form, and we call that as BMD and SFT. Right? We have done that already. The beams deflect under the action of load. You can see in this GIF that I have put here. So there is a specimen and there is force applied at the center of the specimen and it is simply supported on the two ends. The specimen is bending. So that means it is deflecting under the action of external load, right? The material of the beam offers resistance to the deformation, right? It is the property of the material to offer resistance to the deflection, and this resistance which is offered by the material is called as the bending stress, right? So this is about what is bending stress. Now, in order to calculate bending stress, there are many things we need to first understand. So let us start seeing those things. Now, first we will see theory of simple bending, and before we study this, we need to make certain assumptions, right? What are the assumptions? The first assumption is the beam is initially straight. However, if you take any practical case, any beam which is having sufficiently long span, under its own weight, it sags, right? There is already bending that happens. But here we are assuming that the beam is initially straight and there is no deflection in the beam. Second is material is homogeneous. This never happens, but this is one of the assumptions because without such assumptions, you cannot arrive at any conclusion. So, at every given point in the material, we are assuming that the composition of the material is same, that is homogeneous. Material is isotropic. Uh, Basically, what we are saying is the elastic constants do not vary throughout its volume. So second and third more or less is same, not much difference is there. The fourth assumption is the Young's modulus or modulus of elasticity in tension and compression is same for the material. We will understand why we are making this assumption later on when we go to the derivation. The next assumption is the bending stress do not exceed the elastic limit of material. That means, like we saw in this particular GIF here, when the load is applied, the beam deflects and bends, and when the load is released, it again springs back to its original shape. It should be like that. So the stress that is induced in the beam should not cross the elastic limit. If it crosses the elastic limit, then there will be plastic deformation or permanent deformation in the material, and that is not acceptable. That is considered as a failure of the beam. Each layer of material is independent to contract or expand. You can imagine a pack of cards, right? Uh, which is placed one above the other, and when you bend, each of them can bend individually or it can contract, right? So that is what we are saying. So if you take a rectangular mild steel bar or a beam, then what I'm saying is every layer, imagine this into an infinite number of layers, right? And every layer we are assuming that is independent to expand or contract. The next assumption that is made is beam section is symmetrical about the plane of bending. Now, when you're bending like this, then we are assuming that the cross section is symmetrical about the plane. The transverse section, that is the perpendicular section to the plane of bending, which are plane before the bending, remain plane after the bending, and only change the direction. The direction of the plane is changed. That means now let us say if the cross section is like this, right? And when the beam is bent, it will bend like this, but the cross section of this beam does not change, right? Only the plane. Now initially it is 90-degree, now it is tilted like this, right? The plane, the transverse section is only changing the angle, but it is not changing its shape, right? These are the assumptions which are made for derivation of theory of simple bending. This is very important from exam point of view also. Many times this question has been asked to derive the flexural formula. So whatever we are going to do next is that derivation. Okay, so here I have considered a beam, right? And out of this I have taken a small section A, B, C, D, right? And on this we are applying a bending moment of M, right? So opposite bending moments are applied on both the side and we are trying to bend it, right? Now on the left hand side, right hand side here, you can see another diagram which is showing what will be the shape of this section after it bends. I have slightly enlarged it and it is showing the enlarged view of this particular cross section, right? Now, when if you see this, it is clearly we can understand the upper fibers, right? Here, where my mouse is moving, the fibers in this region are compressed because the area which was a rectangle has become a trapezium sort of area like this, and the fiber, the length here is decreased, it is shortened, because of which I can say that the fibers here are getting compressed, whereas the fiber here on the downward side, it is getting elongated or pulled. So there is compressive stress on this side and tensile stress on this side, right? Bending stress is actually a combination of compressive and tensile stress, right? So we will see how to find this equation now. Now in this small section of the beam ABCD, I have considered a small layer of thickness Y just below the neutral axis. Now here this EF represents the neutral axis. So if you observe in this diagram, this is slightly enlarged. Uh, the length AB is greater than A dash B dash, or A dash B dash is less than AB. The length CD is greater than, is less than C dash B dash because it is getting elongated. This length is more than this length. So when that means the length of the fiber is decreasing from this surface to this surface, right? Or it is increasing from this upper fiber to the lower fiber. So when you move from both the ends together, we will reach a point or a layer where the length remains same, it does not change. So that layer is represented by EF, right? So that is called as neutral axis. What do you mean by neutral axis? So like I said, there is compressive stress on the upper fibers and tensile stresses in the lower fiber in the beam. This neutral axis will not have any stress, it will remain as it is. The length of the plane of section in the beam on the neutral axis will remain same. It will not change, right? So that is the neutral axis. So I'm considering a small element of thickness y just below the neutral axis. Now, due to load, the length of GH, this is GH, is now G dash H dash, right? Which is increased slightly. The section of the beam is now a segment of a circle. Instead of this being a rectangle, it is a segment of a circle which is having radius r, thickness y, and it is subtending an angle theta at the center of the curvature. This is the center of curvature. Now from this figure, I can write the initial layer, that is GH, right? This is GH, and that is also equal to EF, right? So this EF is also equal to E dash F dash, because it is the neutral fiber, it is not changing, and this curved length is equal to R theta. For small angle, we can take it as R into theta. And the final layer, that is G dash H dash, if this is r theta and I have moved by distance y, so it is r plus y into theta, right? This is r plus y into theta. Now the strain in this layer, right? Strain is change in length to original length. Now the change in length is the final length g dash h dash minus initial length gh divided by gh. Now we have just substituted the value. G dash h dash is r plus y theta minus gh is r theta divided by gh, which is r theta. Now, if you just take theta inside, this becomes r theta plus y theta. So r theta minus r theta, this gets cancelled. So you get y theta by r theta, theta gets cancelled. So you get strain as y by r. Okay. But from Hooke's law says strain is equal to stress divided by Young's modulus, or Young's modulus is equal to stress by strain, right? So using this, I can write sigma by E is equal to y by r. Now this is my half of the derivation. This is the first part of the bending equation or the flexural formula, right? Now we will do one more derivation. This is called moment of resistance. Now what is moment of resistance? Let us try to understand. Now here I have considered a arbitrary area, and the center of gravity is G, and there is an axis passing through the center of gravity, that is the neutral axis, and I have considered a small elemental area whose area is dA, right, and it is at a distance of y from the neutral axis. Okay, now the force on the area, now this is the beam is being bent, right? The cross section of beam is this, because of which there is compressive stress developed at the top surface, and tensile stress is developed at the bottom surface of the neutral axis. Now I am finding the force on this particular area, right? Now stress is equal to force by area, so force is equal to stress into area, right? Just reverse of that. So dP is the force, and dP is equal to sigma into dA. Sigma is the intensity of stress there. Sigma into dA. Now sigma is equal to y into E by R, right? So we have done that in the previous equation. Y into E by R into dA. Now to find the total force, I have to the moment of this force dP about the neutral axis, because this is moment of resistance. dP is the resistance force, and moment of this force about the neutral axis is called as moment of resistance, right? So that will be dmr. Mr stands for moment of resistance, and that is equal to dP, which is the force, into perpendicular distance, that is y. So we just substitute the values. So there is y here already. So it becomes E by R into y square dA. Now to find the total moment of resistance for the entire area, I have to integrate this equation. So I am integrating between E by R is constant, so that is taken out, between the limits yc to minus yt. What is yc and yt? Yc is the distance of farthest fiber on the uh, upper side of the neutral axis, which is subjected to compressive stress. Yt stands for the distance of the farthest fiber. Farthest fiber means outermost line, right? This surface, the distance from this neutral axis to here, which is subjected to tensile stress, right? Why we are taking plus and minus? I am assuming upward positive, downward as negative. Positive y-axis, negative y-axis. That's why I have taken yc and minus yt, and you have to integrate this. So when you do this, uh, this is called as second moment of area about the neutral axis, right? So um, now the moment of resistance Mr is equated to the moment of moment, which is the applied moment, right? So when you substitute in this equation, m by INA, which is the second moment of area or moment of inertia about the neutral axis, is equal to E by R. Now this is my second equation, and we had another equation earlier, right? So from both of these equation, and when you do rearrangement, we get the flexural formula or the bending equation, which is m by I is equal to sigma by y is equal to E by R, right? So this is the bending equation. This is also called as flexural formula. M by I is equal to sigma by y is equal to E by R. You have to remember this equation. We'll be using this for many of the cases, right? Now, this equation is also known as bending equation. We need to note that this term E by R is normally used only when the bending moment remains constant and the radius of curvature is also constant, right? So we have seen so many what do you call, the BMD and SFD in our previous unit, where the bending moment is varying, right? So in such cases, I cannot use this particular term E by R, right? And also the radius of curvature also should be constant. Otherwise, we cannot use this particular term. So mostly for finding the bending stress, we use this first and second term. So considering the first and second term, we get sigma, that is bending stress, is equal to my by I. Now y, I am taking it to the denominator, so it becomes m by I by y, right? Now I by y is called as the section modulus, and it is represented by z. So sigma is equal to m by z, right? So this is the equation for finding the bending stress. Now let us, I think you have studied about these things already in mechanics. We'll quickly revise this, how to find the center of gravity and how to find the moment of inertia for area, right? Now this is a diagram where I have considered a arbitrary area, right? For which I have to find the center of gravity, because without finding the center of gravity, you cannot find the moment of inertia. So first we need to find the center of gravity. So I have a area here, right? Arbitrary area. So what I have done is I have first divided this area into number of parts, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So each of these areas, it can be assumed to be a small rectangle. So the area of these can be easily found. So the area of each of these section is A1, A2, A3, A4 and so on, right? And these areas are located from this, uh, the center of gravity of each of these elements are located at a particular distance from x-axis and y-axis, right? So first we have to locate the distance of these CG from the x-axis and y-axis. So from the y-axis, the distance of each of the center of gravity of the elemental area is x1, x2, x3 and x4, and on the along the y-axis it is y1, y2, y3 and y4. Okay. Now the moment of total area about y-axis, right? Total area is A. A is equal to A1, A2, A3, A3. Sum of all these elemental area is A, and x bar is the center of gravity of the entire area. That is this point, the intersection of this blue cross line, whatever you can see here. That is the center of gravity represented by G, right? So the area, moment of total area about y-axis is A into x bar. Sorry. Now the moment of small area about y-axis, small areas A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7 and A8. That is given as area into perpendicular distance. So it is A1 x1 plus A2 x2 plus A3 x3 and so on, and that should be equal to the moment of total area about y-axis, that is A into x bar. So from this I can write x bar is equal to A1 x1 plus A2 x2 plus A3 x3 and so on, divided by the total area A. Similarly, you can find the y bar, which is a1 y1 plus a2 y2 plus a3 y3 and so on, divided by a. Now x bar and y bar, with respect to x-axis and y-axis, is actually the location of the center of gravity of the given area, right? So this is how we will find the center of gravity of the given area. Next, we will try to find the moment of inertia. Moment of inertia is also called as area moment of inertia. There is also mass moment of inertia. See, in area moment of inertia, I am only considering this area. In case of mass moment of inertia, instead of area, it will be mass of the object, right? That is the only difference. We don't need mass moment of inertia as of now, so let us not worry about that here. Area moment of inertia is called as second moment of area. Okay. See, moment means something, anything multiplied by perpendicular distance is called as moment. It can be force, it can be area, it can be anything. So here we are taking moment of area. And second moment means we will try to understand. Now first moment of area about y-axis is a into x. So this is y-axis. This is the area I am considered, and this is the CG of that particular area. The CG is at a distance of x from y-axis. That is why the first moment of area about y-axis is the area of this, which is A into perpendicular distances x. Similarly, first moment of area about x-axis is here, and the distance of CG from the x-axis is y. So area into y, A into y. Now the second moment of area about y-axis, second moment means you have the first moment here, which is ax. You take the moment of this, right? So second moment is moment of area. That is called the moment of inertia. So second moment is taken as ax into x, or it becomes ax square, and about x-axis it is ay into y, which is ay square, and this is represented by I, right? Now, depending on which axis, based on which axis you are calculating the moment of inertia, this is given the suffix. Now, if you are taking about the neutral axis, we call it as INA, moment of inertia about the neutral axis. If it is about x-axis, then we call IXX. If it is about y-axis, it is called as IYY, right? Like that. Now, before we go into the derivation of finding the moment of inertia, we will first try to understand another theorem called parallel. Sorry, yeah, this is parallel axis theorem. So, moment of inertia about any axis, any arbitrary axis in the plane of the area, right? So, it is determined using the parallel axis theorem. Uh, if Ig is the moment of inertia of any area about its center of gravity, this is the center of gravity of this particular area, then the moment of inertia about an axis AB, this is the arbitrary axis I have taken, which is parallel in the plane of area, right? It should be parallel to any of the axes, and it should be in the same plane. It cannot be in a different plane, right? And it is at a distance of h from the center of gravity. Then the moment of inertia of this plane about this axis AB, which is parallel to this x-axis, is given by IAB is equal to IG plus AH square, right? IG stands for moment of inertia of this plane about the center of gravity. G is the center of gravity. So IG stands for moment of inertia of this area about the center of gravity, plus A is the area into h square. This is the parallel axis theorem. Now we will be using this to find the moment of inertia of a rectangle. I have just another slide to show the derivation of moment of inertia of a rectangle. Now here I have a rectangular cross section in which I have the center of gravity at the mid line along this depth. B is the depth and B is the width of the rectangle. I have considered a small element of thickness dy, which is away at a distance of y from the xx section, right? So the distance of the farthest fiber on the top side is d by 2, and on the bottom side it is d by 2. Now the area of this strip is width by depth. Width is b and depth is dy. So area of strip is b by dy, and the moment of inertia of this strip about the xx axis. So this is Ig plus AH square. We have to use the same concept here. So the moment of inertia of this is uh, area, right? B into dy into perpendicular distances y. So it is y square, right? So by square dy is the moment of inertia of this strip about this x-axis. Now moment of inertia of the whole rectangle is obtained by integrating this equation between the limits d by 2 and minus d by 2. Again y minus, this is the neutral axis, so I am taking this as positive and this as negative, right? So Ixx is equal to integration between minus d by 2 to plus d by 2, by square dy. B is constant, so it is taken out, and what we get is y cube by 3. When you substitute the value of d by 2 and minus d by 2 in this, and you simplify, you get Ixx as bd cube by 12. This is the area moment of inertia about xx axis, which is passing through the center of gravity of the rectangle. Now similarly, if you do the derivation for y axis, right, y axis will be like this. So you will get Iyy is equal to db cube by 12, right? Yeah. So the depth becomes the width and width becomes the depth here when you take it like this. So this is db cube by 12. Now I have few important sections which I have put the moment of inertia and the section modulus Z. So moment of inertia we just derived about neutral axis is bd cube by 12, and distance of the farthest fiber y is d by 2. So section modulus becomes bd cube by 12 by d by 2, which is bd square by 6. Now we have a hollow rectangle or a rectangular tube. The inner rectangle I have taken B and D lowercase, and outer rectangle we have taken B and D uppercase. So the moment of inertia is BD cube by 12 minus BD cube by 12. So it is 1 by 12 is taken as common, 1 by 12 into BD cube minus BD cube. And the distance of the farthest fiber from the neutral axis is d by 2, capital D by 2, right? Now the section modulus, when you simplify, you get 1 by 6d bd cube minus bd cube, right? So we'll try to understand why hollow sections are used in many places instead of solid section when we go to numericals, right? This is a circular cross section. So we can do similar derivation by considering a elemental circle, right, of at a radius r and thickness dr, right, and find the moment of inertia of that and then integrate between 0 to r, right. So that will give you moment of inertia about x-axis and y-axis both will be pi d power 4 by 64, right. This is the moment of inertia of a circular cross section. Now the distance of farthest fiber from the neutral axis. Neutral axis is the center of the circle. Any point on the surface of this circle, circumference of the circle is the radius or d by 2. So the section modulus becomes pi d 4 by 64 by d by 2, which is pi d cube by 30. Similar to hollow rectangle, we have hollow cylinder or hollow circular section, for which the moment of inertia is pi d power 4 by 64 minus pi d power 4 by 64. So pi by 4 is taken as common, d power 4 minus d power 4, and the distance of farthest fiber is capital D by 2, right. So this is the outer circle, the larger circle, half of that is the radius, and section modulus is I by y max, so that comes to pi by 32d into d power 4 minus d power. Any questions?